Presentation, the obsession machine.
Oh, you are on mute.
I think you've got the recording, the film.
Ah, yes. That's a great point. I found that.
I thought it'd be. I got inside the 8 minutes. I thought it'd be easier to do it that way.
So sorry.
Obsession machine, visual autoethnography in pandemical times. At the beginning of the pandemic, I set out to make a autoethnographically inflected visual document about the pandemic, about our experience. I started by making drawn diaries on folded pieces of paper, sort of sketchbooks, and these developed through the spring and summer of that first year, and they became more complicated, more worked. They wanted to be paintings, so in the autumn I rebooted and made a format. These are 50 centimetres square. They've all got a still life element in them, a still life drawing which relates to the earlier diaries, and they're made on collage surfaces, new pieces of paper made out of resources, drawings, prints, and accumulations, packaging, and so on and so forth, and a lot of work which has been left over from a 30-year art teaching career in middle and high schools and universities in Suffolk. And what I was doing by reworking these, looking at them now, I can see what I'm doing is mourning or coming to terms with the end or the changes in my artist-teacher identity, which I've done a lot of research work into, my PhD and so forth. And I can see here that what I'm doing is working out that artist-teacher identity towards something else. I mean, you might think that if you're an artist teacher and you stop teaching, you switch off the teacher, the artist is left, but my artist-teacher identity, the two parts were so entangled, so entwined, that actually the teasing apart of these two elements was much more difficult, more complicated and more painful than I might have thought. And I can see these now as being a sort of a coming to terms with that, a mourning, all these sort of occlusions and crossings out and reworkings. And it's taken a long while to stop seeing the possible teaching moments or the demonstration possibilities of these works, and to let them be artworks in a different sort of way. It's taken a long while. I did them in a way to keep myself stable during the pandemic. They gave me a project, which is quite a teacher thing to do, to give yourself a project. And it was a process that I'd designed, a methodology, and it was a ritual that I carried out 5 times a week. I posted them 5 times a week. I did give myself the weekends off, but I was very disciplined about it, and it became quite difficult to do as time went on. For the last 8 months, I used a stencil. I took the still life drawing of the ball of string. I made it on a piece of cardboard, a cornflakes box. I waited for the paint to dry, then I cut all the paint away, and I had a stencil, and I used that for the last 8 months or so, making variations. So they're an exploration of stasis, of a frozen moment in the drawing, now frozen in the stencil. They are about stasis. They are about being left up on your own resources, no gallery visits, no studio visits, very little interaction or conversation. They're running on the internet, they're running on my books, they're running on the old work, they're running on my experimentation in colour. They're quite pure in that way, uninfluenced. It's just kind of interesting. And I'd made this, as I could say, an obsession machine to keep myself going and to give myself something meaningful to do. And that pursuit of beauty in difficult circumstances, I think, is quite interesting and quite a powerful thing. Quite a powerful thing to have done. and to have this sort of impulse to make these is I'm still coming to terms with what I've done, if that makes sense. They are really quite complicated, intricate, and strange things. Last year, we were finding things very, very difficult. We'd been in our personal lockdown for 2.5 years. There's over 400 of these paintings. That's a lot. And as we came into the late summer, we were finally told by a medic that we'd be better off going out to take the risk with COVID, that the risk to our mental health of staying isolated was probably greater than COVID by that point. And so I was able to, I promised myself I was going to keep doing this until it was over, not realising that it would go on for such a long time. And then on August 24th, it was switched off. The doctor said we could go out. And I was able to, at long last, put them in the back of a car and take them to the Housewood Gallery and sort them and put a selection on the wall. And this is where, from a mental health point of view, things get much more sketchy, really. This is 1 every 21 days on the wall, so that's like the entire pandemic, and then the pile at the bottom there. That's the entire pandemic on one wall, and that's just like whack. I found that more difficult to absorb all this work in sort of one visual experience of all that I'd done, and good and bad. What I'd achieved by doing it, and my own obsession, my own discipline, my own drive. I found it quite an ambiguous experience to look at these things. I made things worse for myself by having an opportunity later on to put up another sequence. This is 1 month, this is March 2021, again in one go, and they're incredibly intricate. I was well into the flow here, and they're so complex. There's so many decisions, there's so many memories, there's so many bits of experience embedded in these works that just to see them all in one go is overwhelming. And I found it very difficult to come to terms with what I've done in a good way and a bad way. It's been quite difficult. I have got a series of collages left over that I haven't worked on yet, and they are waiting in a corner of another studio, waiting for me to come to terms and to get going again. I have been making work, but not of this sort, and I'm still making sense of what I've done. And thank you very much.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Saunders will present us. Well, where should I go? If you can move. Can I hide behind that?
You can do.
Sure. That's okay. I'll just
We'll shuffle over.
Right. This is called Well Up. Just to introduce it, after the last global financial crash in 2008, I could no longer sustain my creative practice with freelance work, so I had to go out and get a full-time job. And this is what this piece is about. So it's called Well Up. It's day one in my new job as an employment specialist in a psychiatric outpatients hospital. I share the office with 2 other men who also don't want to be here. Manish, the Asian operations manager, a man on the brink whose estate agency business had just folded, and Lance, a Nigerian human rights PhD student, busy writing up his thesis in office hours. Manish tells me only 2 people applied for my post, myself and the first choice candidate who never got back to him. While most NHS male staff are in service user-friendly shirt sleeves, Manish wears a dark business suit and never takes his jacket off to show he is in the business of business, not care. Manish never sits down in the office, avoids computer screens and the piles of unopened letters on top of the filing cabinet. The complaints pile up too about his disengaged management staff. Days before he is sacked, he proudly gets me to Google his property website page. It has a delirious image of a businessman holding a briefcase climbing a stairway up into the clouds. Today I'm shadowing Manish as we wait in reception for his new client, or as he puts it, his 2:30 viewing. He reads out the spec from his client's case file. No work history and not in training. Manish closes the dismal brochure and quietly sees that the insulting miracle is expected to perform to get this man into work. The client is a medicated, pallid man in a stained puffer without drive or hope or youth. In the short session, Manish brings him round to the daunting idea that he has potential, he can get a job, that there is life beyond chemical smothering, poverty and the sofa. This dazzling performance hides the woozy height of the climb out of despair facing this broken man, with Manish only a few steps above him, heading up to a blue sky, or maybe up onto a roof of a high building. Anyway, on my second day, I'm shadowing Lance with his client. 3 men sit in low armchairs in a small, dim therapy room with paper-thin partition walls that leak muffled, lonely sounds of trauma on either side. In the center of the room is a low table with a box of tissues just in case. And next to the panic button by the door, a hygienic impressionist print of flowers just in case. Sat between Lance and myself is another broken man, signed off sick with work-related stress or stress-related work. And harboring dark workaholic thoughts, his suicidal ideation might stop if he was back in work. Warning, workahol not to be consumed by any persons under or over the age of 16. Lance is in glowing compartmental health. He is armoured and businesslike and has no psychological interest in his clients. Plus, Lance has a theory, dental and mental health go together. He had observed that all his clients have bad teeth. Lance's teeth, on the other hand, are perfectly white and straight. Meanwhile, I keep pushing my loose molar about with my tongue. As Lance reads out a grim list of job vacancies, a down-to-earth talk that is too much of a sheer drop for the client who can't bear to look and just stares up at the ceiling to hold the tears as they well up in his saucer eyes. Lance doesn't notice, but I do. I could relate. I drift off remembering my first experience of counselling, sitting with a woman in her mid-40s, her face purple from anguish and grief, blowing bubbles of snot, sobbing, then erupting into convulsions of tears that ran down her sore chin and neck. I tried to console her, but whatever I said, she didn't want to hear. She'd say, "What's the point of going on? My life is over. I might as well just be dead." I didn't know what else to say or do. I was out of my depth and alone with this crisis. My eyes welled up from exhaustion and shame that I was failing in my duty of care and was about to make things worse by abruptly ending the session. I bit my lip and then forced out the words, "I'm sorry, Mum, I have to go or I'll be late for school." It's 1:30 on a winter's afternoon and it's already getting dark. I'm sitting in the gloom of the community drug and alcohol team counselling room, waiting for work-ready clients to knock, but no one turns up. The CDAT, the Community Drug and Alcohol Team Clinic, is a long, desolate walk around the hospital's now abandoned children's unit that was to be called the Jimmy Savile Wing, until Operation U-Tree and more austerity cuts. The pristine empty clinic has little yellow bins for needles dotted about, and the sickly smell of surgical spirit gives me butterflies, that eerie pent-up stage before they can fly when their wings are still wet and shivering. The drug and alcohol team's rescue work needs a one-day-at-a-time optimism. I'd seen some of them out to lunch, a single unit of 3 trauma-bonded bodies snuggled together in deepest sympathy. They don't walk, they mope. Their NHS lanyards giving them an unlikely alibi of being more alive than their clients. The next week, Anna, the team lead, puts her head round the door to check I'm still there, and moments later props up her work-ready client against the wall. A thin off-white man aged somewhere between 25 and 50. His yellowing skin stretched over his skull like a beaten drum, his eyes shut and his mouth wide open. He's just had his methadone shot, explains Anna. And then she goes, Chris is going to help you find a job. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Let's try again next week, shall we? That would be better, wouldn't it? I worked as an usher in an independent cinema once with an ex-concert violinist whose early promise had been broken. He'd sit in the same chair for hours in a glow of self-acceptance and humming contentment. I thought it was his Zen nature until someone told me it was heroin. Most days, Manish stands in deep thought looking out of the office window at the jets crossing the sky. Manish is fond of jets. He says their constant rumble at night helps him sleep. He's always lived close to Heathrow Airport, Terminal 2, just in case. Manish is desperate to escape from the job. I can relate, but I also feel strangely at home here in this hospital. My rescue complex made concrete. I'm pretending, like anthropologists often do, to be a detached observer, as if my own psychology is not mirrored in the people I'm seeing. Manish sees my decision to stay in the job as a betrayal and comes right up close to my face, close enough for me to study the unchecked baggage under his sunset eyes, as he offers me this employment advice. Get out while you still can, Chris. We're made for better things than this. We could be doing so much better than this. There you go.
Thank you, Chris. That was, full of some painful resonances as well as some painful laughs. Some connections there, which we can obviously revisit in a minute. So next we have Whatever Happened to My Reflection, A Tale of Mirror Twin Separation by Elke Hautala.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay? I apologize. I'm in Seattle, Washington, and it's 3 a.m. here. So I just was very excited to be able to join you, and the energy there is amazing. I'm going to share the link in the chat in case anybody didn't have a chance to watch it. It's longer than 8 minutes though, so I'll leave it just so you guys can watch it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my influences and I'll share a little bit from it. So a little bit about me. I'm a filmmaker, performing artist for a long time, and also now a visual anthropologist. And I'm just finishing my master's degree at HMKW Berlin, which is an online program. And it's been like a revelation for me being able to bring my practice together in these ways, especially when, here we go, I got the link in there. So hopefully you guys will be able to access it if you want to just look at pieces and stuff, because it is a very audio visual based piece. And so in addition to having practice in all those areas, I'm also an identical twin myself, a female monozygotic twin, as they say. So we are identical, the same egg split. My twin lives in Idaho now, and she moved during the pandemic. So this project was born out of the experience of being separated from her both physically and ideologically, because she's also born again Christian and my belief system is more agnostic. So navigating the distance between us has been a huge part of this project and my expression. So just a little bit of the lyrics that I engage with. I engage with songwriting practice and filmmaking for my arts-led research. And I'll read a few of the lyrics and then talk a little bit about my background with the piece. The distance between us feels like more than the 502 miles they say it takes to drive that way. At first, it felt like heartbreak being torn in two, a slow motion separation between me and you. Now, I don't know how to talk to you beneath the surface anymore, so I guess I'll use music, which we both adore. Caught thrashing in the waves between the sea and the shore. It's all pink stucco and sunshine like Florida in 1994. Are you also afraid to wade out to the depths? Not sure of what you'll find? Is the murkiness too great? Guess we could float together, take our time, you and I. Just reach out your hand and take mine. You know, I would sing, but just at the time of day it is. Normally I would actually sing my piece because it is a huge part of my practice, but right now it would not sound as good. So you can see it has a very, I really like to bridge the gap between, you know, the more almost commercial entertainment world and the educational side of things. And my passion is public engagement. And a lot of my pieces really connect to public history as well, even though this one is a much more internal and intimate piece. I love that I'm in the mental health section because that is something that really resonates with this experience for me. And I think it's something that's so important for people. And I feel like arts-based expression can be such an important component in that. So for those of you who didn't watch the piece, I'll talk a little bit about my influences and experience with it, and then turn it over. So it is really this narrative exploration of kinship connections and relationships, and I'm exploring twinship. And I'm actually doing my thesis on a further exploration of twinship, the unique relationship between female monozygotic twins. And not only that, but how we experience separation. So I use self-reflexive journaling and imaginative emotional performance. And I have projected archival images that reflect a visual interior monologue or stream of consciousness. And they are literally archival pieces from my past with my twin sister. So part of what I was navigating is that this experience is about my experience of separation, even though it's also reflective of the unique relationship of mirror twins, because we are mirror image twins, and she's left-handed, I'm right-handed. It is when the egg splits really late. And something interesting that I learned is if we would have split any later, we would have been conjoined, basically. So mirror twins is the last one before you're actually conjoined. So there's such an interesting relationship there where we often have like an opposite, almost reflective personality in ways. But we're super intimate too, as well. So there's this push-pull, I call it, this sort of like constant need to be close to each other, but also need to individuate. So it's a really fascinating relationship to study. And I have engaged with autoethnographic methodology as a way to dig deeper into that. And I'm so interested in trying to help people who are what we call singletons, non-twins, find a way to engage with the uniqueness. Oh, sorry, did I miss that? Singletons. Yeah. So I know it is a funny term, right? So help them engage with what it's like to be a twin. Like my thesis coming up is actually all about, in some ways, can other people understand what it's like to be a twin and feel what that's like? So some of the things that I learned during this experience was how grief motivates us. You know, it came from a place of grief. I mean, not speaking to my identical twin for a couple weeks, which was part of the experience, you know, devastated me and put me in a place where it said, that's out of the lyrics. It felt like a breakup at first. And we did come around to talking to each other again. I think it was so important for us. You know, we couldn't let the relationship drop for very long, even with having that physical distance between us by being like one state away rather. We still need to feel that we have the other person there and we have such a strong thread. So I engaged with like Tammy Spry, how she talks about embodying this performative turn upon grief, activated an intervention upon dominant cultural performances of grief. And Lucy Bergman was super influential from University of Leeds with her project Rooms. Not sure if anybody's seen that, but she actually helped guide me in putting this project together. And I think oftentimes we engage with or start working on this process from a point where we need to, it's overwhelming emotion and weight, and we need to find a way to get it out and express this interiority and also affect the societal and cultural norms. And I know it felt that way for me. And oftentimes when you do have an arts practice, it's the strongest way to be able to engage with that. And one of the things that I also learned, it was a real journey, it's an ongoing cycle. I think I started out hoping that there would be a moment of final solution, like, okay, now we're good here. Our relationship is perfect forever, right? But I think you can already see that that's not the case. There's rarely a sense of finality to these types of issues. And one of the huge things that I've come to learn as I've evolved with my research on the twin relationship is, yes, it is a supernatural, ultimately close, almost hyper sibling relationship, but it's also a relationship. It takes work. And that was something that I hadn't ever thought about, so I've learned that I have to work on my relationship with my twin. And so it's always going to be evolving and changing. There's this post-structuralist school of thought that we as people are always becoming, evolving, and changing, the Deleuze and Guattari. And so I had this amazing revelatory moment of performing with my twin over the summer at the convention that I work at. And we were, parts of that are in the piece. And that was like this incredibly emotional moment where we reconnected. But I have had moments after that where I'm questioning, our closeness again, and if I understand her. But I do feel like engaging with this performative research did help me better see things from her perspective and see that I think at first I made it a lot about the specifics of her beliefs and whether they were different from me. But I've come around to see that they aren't necessarily so different from me. It's that she is a performer, and she, in both traditional and social network means, and that's where she's most comfortable, and that she's a survivor, and she's really looking to do the best she can in the situation that she's in, and she wants it to be successful. So I think it took a lot of that type of understanding to come around. So I want to leave off with another beautiful quote from Tammy Spry. Sometimes it's in the way that we live experience directly, but study it performatively, that we find ways to live in the fragments of language and bodies that lie about the stages of interactions with others in contexts. And I felt like this just really beautifully emphasized what I was working on. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. If you didn't get a chance to watch the piece, please feel free to, although I'd rather have it stay. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I just saw your message. I'd rather have it stay within like this space. So don't share it all over the internet just yet, because it is a very intimate piece. And I want to respect that with my sister too. So thank you so much. I'll go ahead and close off with that. I really appreciate it.
Terrific, Elke. Thank you very much. Wonderful people. We now have Cheralyn May from Plymouth with her presentation, Love, Death and Sharing, an autobiographical approach to, I never know what to say, slash in the middle. Some people do, so I just like to make one with my hands, Autobiographical approach to single adults' identity during COVID pandemic.
I'd like to say as well, I did a longer version of this, but slightly different themes in Oxford, so apologise to anyone. Apologies to anyone like Gail who's already seen it, but it's slightly different. So yeah, obviously I'm Cheralyn. I'm a postgrad student at the University of Plymouth. My research masters is about single adults and their experiences of wellbeing during the pandemic. I've just completed the interview stage. I'm in the transcription analysis stage now. So Love, Death and Sharing is, it started life as a piece of therapeutic writing about a difficult personal story of mine that began when the first lockdown in the UK. I use it here as bricolage, which I think is the right word. So I use it to cut and reorder it with my reflections on the interview process to explore different themes in our combined pandemic stories. In the version that I'm reading today, I focus on the impact that COVID had on my identity as a single person and as a friend. This presentation is an experiment. I'd read Ellis's Final Negotiations and Richardson's Last Rites. I'd been moved by how they weren't afraid to talk about difficult emotions with honesty. We worked on this, I wanted to do the same. I also wanted to share how sharing experiences during the interview process helped me understand my own experiences. And I guess it goes without saying that everyone I've quoted here is with a pseudonym. This is my sadness. During the pandemic, I fell in love with my friend's husband, and then she died. She didn't die of COVID. I went to visit them both after the lockdowns when my friendship with the husband was blossoming, and I was wondering if it could become something more. I don't know how I expected that to work really and not destroy both our friendships and wreck that family. I had this half-baked idea that I'd ask her permission to have an affair with the husband, and she would say, yeah, that's fine, no problem, go ahead. So that conversation didn't happen. I went out for a night out with the husband. We had a good time. I slept over on the sofa. I drove home the next day, glad I hadn't messed it all up. I was speaking to the husband before getting up. He said that she was tired and withdrawn. When she wasn't working, she was sleeping. They're barely talking to each other. I just thought it was the mental health impact of lockdown. They had it worse up north. She told me she was flushing with vitamin C because she thought she was having a flare-up of an old illness she had as a child. I didn't tell her I'd read the science behind the vitamin C thing and was sceptical. Losing friends over ideas of real science was a possibility during the pandemic, and I was scared of it. I missed people and needed all the friends I could get. I thought that she was tired all the time because she was miserable with her life, but I didn't tell her that either. I just nodded because I didn't think we were close enough to have either conversation, and I said, I've read about the vitamin C thing. It turned out that tiredness and withdrawal were cancer setting in. COVID was draining her chest and she didn't want to burden it. She just slept and drank vitamin C where her health got worse until it was too late to do anything about it. It moved fast after that. Less than 2 years later, she was dead. I saw a side of myself that shocked me during the pandemic, and interviewing others about their experiences helped me make sense of it. One of my interviews, Lisa, talked about how she started seeing a married man. She wanted him to leave his wife for her, which of course didn't happen. She struggled with thinking in a way that wasn't usually her. She said to me, that experience has definitely taken my mind to places I wouldn't have gone. And I've definitely done things in relationships that I wouldn't have done. In the past times, I'd meet mad guys and I have no problem saying no. This time I was just like, well, this guy's hot. I'm going to be selfish. But I would not have done that out of COVID times. Definitely not. Lisa asked me for my thoughts on what she said, and I didn't want to play the neutral observer role when she had shared something so vulnerable, so I told her part of my story. I couldn't cope with my friends in lockdown 3, so I started spending a lot of time talking to a married friend that lived up country. And although I don't think he was interested in me, the friendship we had during lockdown was definitely intense. And for a while, I was all set to ask him to leave his wife and leave him with me. I also remember thinking, fuck it, I'm going to be selfish. It never happened, and now we barely speak. But I still think it was something about lockdown. I would have had the crush without COVID, but never intend to ask him to leave his wife. The pandemic challenged my identity as a happy single person and as someone who valued friendship. Being physically apart from most of the people I would choose to spend my time with made me feel like I was no longer around people who kept me being me. I spent 40 hours a week in a very gendered environment with women who would talk about their families during the quiet times at work. Their life wasn't my life. My life was single. My life evolved around adventures by myself and moments with my friends. Without my friends, I felt adrift and I longed for a connection, but lockdown didn't make this easy to find. When I first started recruiting interviews, I had some fixed ideas around the concept of single, like these, maybe single and happy most of the time like me, or maybe with other priorities. I didn't consider that the word single would be open to interpretation and that people would question me over what I meant by the word single. All these different things. While I was recruiting, I joined a Facebook group for singles. The group admin posted a request for emails of experiences of being single at Christmas. In my efforts to be helpful, I overshared, right down to telling her this. Well, my default mood is single, but all my friends is a long-term chat buddy. We see each other occasionally for sex and sometimes just to do lunch. And then I panicked because I worried that I wasn't single enough to fit into a research, but I pressed send. My research taught me that I wasn't the only person whose friendships were changed by the pandemic. Interviewees also struggled with friendships during lockdown. As people adjusted to living by the new rules, they would find themselves cutting down their social networks to people that backed up their own view of reality. That might mean restricting communication to their own household and cutting ties with friends, sometimes permanently. They'd also stop contact with anyone who might present views that they didn't feel mentally strong enough to challenge, or who might require emotional support they didn't have the capacity to give. It was like freedom of movement was needed for the headspace required to maintain friendships. One interviewee, Maggie, who saw travelling and working abroad as a significant part of identity, struggled to talk to friends with different political viewpoints, or those who might want to talk about their own difficult pandemic experiences. She said to me, I found it really hard because under normal circumstances, I feel like I was the person that could be the support bubble. And I just lost it. Like I just didn't want to talk to people. You had nothing to say. And it was just a constant drone of sadness. And that's harder than something making me sad. It's just a constant drone of, I can't do anything. This is miserable. I can't go out. This extended to forming new relationships as well, as Brenda, who was a carer for a mother, demonstrates. COVID divided people very strongly. I was in such a protective mode over myself and my mum. I couldn't afford to waste that energy trying to meet somebody who was against it and who was saying, COVID doesn't exist, I'm not having the jabs, all of that. I just didn't feel right, because now having entered the online dating, I absolutely hate it. So I'm very glad I didn't have the extra pressure as well. These are my friend's last days. When my friend was diagnosed with cancer at the end of 2021, we were told she didn't have much time left. The cancer spread too far. A group of distant university friends sprang up around her. We created a messenger group and shared updates on how she was doing, so she didn't have to repeat herself. We made plans to go and visit her when she could tolerate us. It seems an odd thing to say that the best thing that came out of my friend's death was becoming closer to her and my other old friends. I saw once between the time that she was diagnosed and the time that she died. I'm grateful that I saw it all. I dreaded it in the lead up. How would she look? Would I have to fake it, pretend that she looked good when she just looked like death? I was relieved that it wasn't like that. It just felt good to see her. She was noticeably ill, but I was happy to see how lively she was. I'd expected so much worse. She'd been given a treatment that was having a positive effect, and she had been told that she could expect a few more years. So families were making plans together. I was happy to see that, as well as they could be, they were coping. Over the next 6 months or so, it felt like I checked in with her a lot, certainly more than usual. It was difficult to get a balance right between being a good friend and giving my friend space. I followed her family pictures on Instagram. She was doing fun things with her family and making happy memories. I wish that they had time to do all those things when she was well, but full-time work often gets in the way of our best days. Suddenly, her treatment stopped working. She had a choice between chemotherapy or nothing. She chose quality of life. I was glad when she went for the quality. I wanted her to enjoy her life. In this last couple of months, I tried to figure out what I want for my friends if it was me. I couldn't tell. The only thing that I could say with certainty is that I want to know that I was loved. So that's how I chose to support her as she went into the hospice. As she sent me messages that were filled with sadness, I'd basically love bombed her. I sent her messages telling her how much I loved her, so that she'd wake up and read them and know that she was in my thoughts, even when she got too tired to message back. The last message I sent her that stayed unread was this: Good morning, don't know if you see this later, but thinking of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cheralyn. And finally, to round off the panel, Anne-Marie Lofthus
Yes, thank you.
will come and present to us Silence is Golden, about failing
Yeah,
in academy.
yeah. So I'm a former member of Failing Anonymous. I am a researcher, done a post, and I'm in a postdoc position in Norway. My presentation is named Silence is Golden. Ruskesara doesn't want to shut up, so she shares her experiences with failing in academia. Because I have experienced to be rejected by the committee, and I had to do it all, the thesis all around. So this is going to be one experiment where I'm acting as Ruskesara, that's her when she was 1.5 years old. And she's an academic, and here is a folk dancer. So I promised to do that I'm going to dance my PhD work. So here we go. You're going to listen to Hardanger fiddle, and that's quite a distinct sound. Some people call it like the cat is meowing, but for me it's the most beautiful instrument in the world. It goes like this. Are you ready to do that? I'm ready. When I'm dancing, I have to count. And it goes like this. Tung tyngre lett, tung tyngre lett, tung tyngre lett. That means, yeah, it's so difficult to say it in English as well. That means heavier, and light. So that was the work. So I felt that was my PhD. So I can start. When I hear this tune called Ruskisara, I have the tune and I, we have a common destiny. We share the same name. My father used to call me Ruskisara when he was in a good mood. And today I use the name as a compliment. I have always been a Ruskisara. That is the Norwegian term for a robust girl who can bear the brunt. When she falls, she gets up and brushes dirt off her knees and carry on. Ruskisara loved school, but her head was a mess. And this has been a description of my life. I had my share of challenges, and it became my livelihood to solve them. But Ruskisara was really ambitious. I wanted to become the Norwegian broadcaster's correspondent in Washington, but I ended as a reporter from the bars in Oslo. Ruskisara became a PhD student because of her lived experiences. This can also heavier light. This can also be adequate headline of my PhD work. The first beat, heavy. I became a PhD student when I was 42 years old. The learning curve was really steep. I had to work hard to fill my large knowledge gap. I was headstrong and difficult to supervise. I had my mind on my own. I fell, I got up, brushed the dirt off my knees and carried on. Tung tyngre lett, tung tyngre lett. I worked on borrowed time and there were no posts available. I felt stressed and bewildered. Ruskisara wanted to be an AutoEthnographer. I didn't do it well enough in my PhD thesis. I submitted it anyway. I needed to finish that part of my life. I needed to move on. Second beat, heavier. Ruskisara was optimistic in the absence of contrary evidence. The new evidence came as an email from the Faculty of Medicine. My thesis was rejected. I had to rewrite my thesis and the third art paper. I had to wait at least 6 months for the new submission. I fell, I got up, brushed the dirt off my knees and carried on. Tung tyngre lett, tung tyngre lett. Ruskisara had a new job as a lecturer. My working day started at 5 in the morning, some hours writing on the third article and the thesis before I worked long hours as a pedagogue. In the evening, I kept on finishing up my PhD thesis. The second beat, heavier, is both longer and more demanding. I guess I had the longest year of my life, but I made it through. I submitted my new thesis at the same day my fellow PhD colleague had her viva. It was a beautiful June day. The third beat, light. Ruskisara prepared well for the defense. I had the committee's approval. They characterized the thesis as brilliant. They praised my hard work. I didn't fail. I didn't have to get up to brush the dirt off my knees. I just carried on. Tung tyngre lett, tung tyngre lett. Ruskisara realized she needed to get this feeling of failure out of her system. I wrote about the shame and the feelings of failure in an ethnographic paper. I criticized silence in academia when you fall through. I wanted to be a voice for those who needed several attempts to succeed. argue that experiences with failing makes you a better scholar. The paper received a warm welcome. Peers and fellow sufferers praised the initiative. Students thank me for my openness and frankness and gave them hope for a future as a scholar. Today, the paper has almost 6,000 downloads. That's quite remarkable for a scientific paper written in Norwegian. Outside the academy, read my scientific work thanks to the evocative AutoEthnography. I have had talks with students in Norway and Tanzania. I thought of the shaming of academic failures as literally universal. Sometimes you must fall, but you get up, brush the dirt off your knees and carry on. And Ruskesara, do research and dance.
Well, folks, 5 tremendous presentations there. I think there's a lot that we can take from that to think about. I'm sure there are lots of questions, ideas, resonances in the room. I've written here, process, becoming, curation, archiving. I'm still struggling over that word. Came up yesterday, it seems to be coming around again today. Lots of ways that people draw things from the cellar of their resources for display, start with Paul and work their way through all these other ideas, such as Chris's particular memories and experiences. Yeah, so there's lots to play with there. My brain has got a bit busy, which means I'm likely to ramble, so I'm going to stop talking now and let people ask questions.
Can I ask a question to
Go for
Paul?
it, Beth.
Is he going to be touring his work? Are you?
Did you get that, Paul?
Am I doing what?
Beth, tell us.
Are you touring?
Touring?
The way.
Well, I'd like to. I think it'd be quite difficult to install, but yeah, I'm looking for a venue where I might be able to put it all up in one go, or put up sections of it. If anybody's got a venue.
Yeah, please come to Sheffield. We'll lend you a gallery.
Yeah, okay. If you send me a contact detail, yes, I'll come along. I'll be glad to.
Yeah, Paul, the paintings are beautiful, and I kept on thinking it'd be lovely to see them in a book, so you can look at them individually, because I found when you put them all up on the wall, they all kind of lose their energy, for me anyway. It was difficult to decipher it, and I just wondered if you thought that too, maybe.
Yeah, I think when I put them on the wall, I was thinking of the Instagram grid, and it was sort of an attempt to make the Instagram grid in real life, but the effect was, as I say, just too much, really.
Yeah.
You lost the individual each day's piece of work. You know, you couldn't see it so well in a way, and the result was just completely overwhelming. So I think the idea of making a book is something I've been thinking about. I think they might work better like that.
Yeah.
Less of them in one go.
I actually quite liked them like that for that reason, because it was overwhelming as well. Like, because I think so much of like human emotion, we like to wrap it up in neat little packages, but actually it kind of is a big wall of mayhem, isn't it?
Yeah.
I imagine like that would be so powerful to be confronted with this wall of days that mush into one. Like when you think of lockdown, it's like it's a bit of a blur as well, isn't it? And then you can zoom in and just go into one day and see that, but also see it for this chaos of human experience as well.
Or what about an exhibition with a very beautiful, beautifully bound, what do you call that? Just a coffee table book.
Yeah,
That
catalog, yeah.
away from it might be nice.
It could be both.
Yeah.
It would be nice to put all 400 up in one go, just once, really, to see what it's like. I can stand it.
I think we have another question.
No, I was going to say the same. I really liked the, those individual days, but then the overwhelm of lockdown and COVID. Yeah, I really like that kind of, when you said, Paul, when you put them up the wall, kind of, it hits. So I can imagine, I was just like picturing you each day, kind of, I don't know how your day was, but kind of, making, forming, and each day being different, and yet, catching something overall at the same time. Yeah, I like that.
Mel?
Help me, people who were in the session downstairs earlier this morning, because I was particularly struck, this is particularly for Paul, but others as well, that moment when you exhibited the pieces of art, something different happened for you. And maybe I was thinking, were you thinking you would feel less painful in terms of your mental health, but actually it was a more painful experience. And it was a very powerful, not necessarily painful this morning, just very powerful and moving when people were reading and performing their pieces this morning. And that was mostly about spoken word or written and spoken word, and then yours was about art. And I was just kind of thinking about the crossover and similarities and differences between that. Is it making sense to those who were in that section this morning? Yeah. But there's a moment, it's almost like that breathe in and breathe out, it's like that breath moment, that triangle people were talking about yesterday, where that's where the creative and that's where the effect is occurring.
Yeah.
Sally Chisholm?
I'm sorry, I was going to say something about the humour, but then actually what struck me was the pain and the humour together, and that jarring, and then that equally fitted with what I've just said about your workforce, that really thinking the humour and the pain together jar and make each of them, for me anyway, more poignant, more deeper in a way. I feel them more deeply, catching myself laughing, and at the same time, oh my God, I've just laughed at the pain of that. Yeah,
And that was particularly so for your presentation.
but also, also yours as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, everybody was telling stories that can contain some pain and deep emotion, but we laughed in every presentation. So because there was huge moments of kind of collective joy almost, resonance too. So that was really striking.
I wondered, Chris, about there's a culture, obviously, in mental health services, and this as well. Other people who've worked in mental health services too. I'm a real, but there's loads of us. There's a way that people manage their difficulties through humour, and the word appropriate got mentioned this morning, and I've got a real beef with that word. It's so malleable, it's so fluid. What does it mean to anybody in any one particular moment? How do you know when a thing is appropriate? But in here, in that room, those things that you shared in your presentation were hilarious and full of pathos and meant something to the people in the room. I would wonder if you had that conversation in the staff room of a rehab unit, it wouldn't be that, would it? Something else.
Yeah, no, it was a very kind of almost monastic kind of experience being in the NHS in this hospital. People are very careful with their feelings. They're very careful not to. Well, there is some humour. I'm being over exaggerating it, but it was only out of work, outside talking to Krista after work and sort of de-stressing from a day of dealing with these almost impossible situations with people that are just really being dumped into mental health when most of them actually needed learning difficulties support or other kinds of support which wasn't available. Plus, the social system is all about, I mean, it was just a very cheap way of dealing with marginalised, disenfranchised people. Employ some, the DW, Department of Work for Pensions, put money into all this, which is why I got the job really, because suddenly there were jobs available. And it was a bit of a con really. I mean, not a con, but it was just a way of doing very cut price psychotherapy. So I'd be working in a psychotherapist counselling work, and I had absolutely no experience of counselling whatsoever, apart from working with my mother. And it was doing that job that I realised where my rescue complex came from, and I could see a lot of the other people working as social workers were also dealing with all their stuff, which they might reveal after a while. So I think that's what inspired it, really.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, that really speaks to a kind of hugging. That I think pulls up something it's becoming more apparent now, at least in the areas of mental health nurse education that I'm in. People are more open about their reasons for being attracted to that field of work, whereas the people who already work there inhabit a culture of silence around those reasons for being there. Yeah. So there is no porosity. There's a very strictness in them, and what you did was really beautiful with them was the porosity of it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Chris, sorry, do you know that joke that you did? Sorry, because I am crazy about the teeth, because I'm actually that person crazy about teeth. And it was really interesting that you noted that all those people that had mental health problems, their teeth were bad. And I think we need to get that across. Yeah. Because it's to do with poverty and access. Yeah, and it does affect their brains, because I researched that. I am into teeth. Look at that.
We have a couple of so we have a couple of online questions. I'd like to. Sam's got a hand up. So I'd be very interested to see what Sam had to bring in.
Yeah, I'm just coming back to the term appropriate, which is what I was talking about this morning. And the interesting thing about that is often that word is used by somebody else to define what they think is appropriate for you. And that sort of links to that otherness. And I remember in a previous job, before I came into research, that I was employed because of my lived experience. And then my boss at the time said, right, you're here now, you leave that at the door. You leave that part of your identity at the door. That's not appropriate now. So I suppose it's yes, appropriate. What the hell does that actually mean? And actually, who has the power to define that in somebody? Because in real terms, that equates to services, benefits, and all kinds of other things. So it's an important reality for people.
Thank you, Sam. We'll just come to Karen after we'll just have a look at these. Sorry, of course. So Joanna said she's mentioned Chang Paul. I guess that's he one. Would suggest a zooming in and zooming out of research, and your enables that. And Elke says, I was very engaged with the use of humour, which is so key to the human experience and connection. I'm fascinated with how you navigate that. That was such a powerful way that you framed that twist in your piece, where you revealed that you were talking to your mother, Chris. Karen.
Yeah, this is for, I'm sorry, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Elke, I think. So I'm a twin as well. I have a twin sister, and it is the most significant relationship of my life. I've known her since birth, clearly. And so I think about what you're doing and what you're writing about, and the most obvious question that I get asked every time you find out I'm a twin is, what's it like to be a twin? and you're doing research about what I think is the most significant relationship of my life, and I wonder how you do that and how you explain to people what that relationship's like, because I can't. I say, what's it like to be single?
Exactly, though. I think that's a great point, which is one of the reasons why I'm trying to find a way, especially in my ongoing thesis, which is called Performing Twinship, and is really about the uniqueness of the monozygotic female twin relationship in particular, both from an autoethnographic standpoint, and this time I'm doing qualitative methodology, so I'm doing interviews with other sets of twins. But you're exactly right. That's the thing that other twins, when I interviewed them about it, have said, I can't explain what it's like to not have a twin, so I'm hoping that through this sort of immersive engagement of artistic expression that people can potentially share in it. There's like two avenues that I'm exploring with it. One would be having some sort of interactive event. I'm going to have an art installation in Berlin at graduation, and I'm doing a performative aspect to it. So I'm showing my music videos that I created for my thesis, which are like fairy tale narrative original songs based on my research. And so I'm hoping that gives people an idea of what it's like. But I also feel like there's got to be a way that I can help people understand these aspects of performing twinship. There's like a vocal intimacy, there's a physical proximity, there's like embodied ways that we are with each other, so there's all these different aspects that I'm investigating right now, and exploring, I should say, is a better word. And that's the question, though. I don't know yet whether people can share in performing twinship. The other thing that is, I'm just going to leave a little piece about, because I haven't been delving into it as much, is the potential with like AI and this sort of idea of duplication. I'm fascinated by that as well. And is that something that can help people understand the twin relationship more? I'm just at the very tip of the iceberg on that one, but just sort of leaving that out there is an interesting potential thing to think about. And I love hearing from fellow twins. If you ever want to share anything in one of the research studies, would love to connect with you. So thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, Elke. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry, but I think I'm going to have to draw a veil there, because I know the Tudor has to, in about 2 weeks' time, be downstairs eating something big. We should all be migrating with it, bearing you a loft Tudor down the stairs. Can we just give everybody a big hand again for an amazing Oh, do we have a time?
We've got a
time difference on our.
So
This program says 12:10. My apologies. Well, we can all hold money, aren't we? I know. Well, in that case,
Listen, there are a couple of different programs floating around, so I have an old one. Apologies.
Okay, so just to make sure, the last emails one was 12:20. There's a break, and then 12:30. That's the session.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
So
we're fine.
We're fine. We're fine. Oh, extra claps for everyone anyway. We shouldn't worry about that, Yes, well,
question to Anne-Marie. When it comes to learning, mistakes is unnecessary. And you work in a university setting. Have you found, and when failing got this bad reputation, doesn't that mean also that learning gets a bad reputation? It seems to me that at least in our country, we live in a culture where to do mistakes, you try to abolish mistakes. And for me, that would mean that we abolish learning.
The ability to learn. Yeah, I do agree. And that's perhaps why I wrote my piece, because I felt really ashamed and nobody talked about it. And suddenly I was in the conference in Chicago, the ICQI. Yeah. in 1917, and suddenly I met another scholar that had the same experience. So, and being in an environment where people moved on and just be stuck, it was really demanding. But now I can use my experiences and say that you have to work if you will do something about your studies. So yeah, I think that is also an important message to send.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the issue of bravery. I mean, lots of bravery in all of the stories, and Cheralyn particularly mentioned wanting to be brave, and I just wanted to say you are, and it's brilliant stuff.
Can I actually say something to you? I think you need to get this message around when going to universities, because we spend a lot of time talking about, how to succeed. Nobody ever talks about failure. And Mike and I have got a friend who, she failed a confirmation review, and she didn't want to tell anybody because she felt such shame.
Yeah, and I'm going to write another piece in English.
Yes, please.
I've done the academic outing, so I'm out there, and I'm not anonymous anymore. I'm proud of it. To just be like a cat and land on my feet.
Would you also have had this feeling because after all you succeeded in your PhD, how would it have been if you would not have?
Of course, there are quite many stories about people just leaving academia because they fail. But sometimes I guess my story is that it's possible to fail once or twice, but you can still be a good academic, perhaps a better academic, because you have to really, really work hard. Yeah.
Can I ask which version you preferred yourself?
I prefer to be the one that has failed.
No, I mean of the two studies that you had to rewrite. Which
of course,
version?
the second one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
A friend of mine didn't pass, and I preferred the first version than the second version.
The first version was of bad quality.
Okay.
As I tried to say, it was also because I was very stressed. I felt that I had a knife on my throat. And I think that is quite many academics experiencing that, or having that experience. And it's also in my Norwegian paper, I also talk about these difficulties we experience when we are doing the PhD, because we don't have not many have a job to go to, so they don't have this economic guarantee when you finish, and so there all the uncertainties. And I was commuting, so I was using 3 hours one way to my work. And when I was a PhD candidate, I was 1.5 hours away. So it was quite much stress.
I think sometimes we need to ask the question, do we fail in academia or does academia fail us?
Yes.
Because, okay, here's a story. I started my PhD and I had a pair of supervisors who wanted me to do it their way. Heidegger and hermeneutical phenomena. No, I'm sorry, exactly. To talk about child sexuality, no. So I had an epiphany, and I have the post-it still, it's orange, and I wrote on it, it's the wrong fucking methodology. And then it was, okay, I need new supervisors. I was presented with new supervisors who were incredibly uncomfortable with how I write and what I write about, and it was constant, your writing isn't academic enough, you're not doing this enough, there's too much of this, there's not enough of that, and I'm saying, specifically show me where and I can fix it. That was and the ethics thing have you thought about how your brothers will feel when you publish your PhD? And my response was, oh, fuck them. If they did not want to be known as rapists, perhaps they shouldn't have raped me. There's a thought. And of course, Anne Lamott's quotation about you own everything that happened to you. Yeah. You know, tell your stories. If people wanted to be remembered, they should have treated you better. So what ended up happening is 3 weeks from submission, I just thought, and my ethics were questioned. And then I found an email that I wasn't supposed to have seen that was sent to me by accident, where, you know, people are having discussions behind my back about the worth of my work and how much it would be worth to the university. And I just thought, can't. And you're questioning my ethics. Because, and they didn't know the difference between pseudonymous and anonymous. I was like, you're not anonymous. They are anonymous. You can't go to Offaly and find the Mary I'm talking about, can you? So, so 3 weeks out, I withdrew and thought, I don't know what to do with it. Where am I going to publish? Who's going to have me? How do I? But I whiplashed with how quickly it turned around, because within 7 hours, I had a new supervisory panel and a place in the University of Southern Queensland. And these new supervisors are situated in my work. One of them is an AutoEthnographer. She knows what we're doing. The other one is a child protection social worker. She's looking at my stuff and going, we had a feeling, but nobody's done the research. Now you've done the research. And kind of go, this is great, because how you write is accessible. And I'm thinking, if I'd gone with the other crowd, you know, stayed in, I never have finished. Because so I'm wondering if there's a commonality, and I'm seeing so many nodding heads here that I'm thinking I'm not the only one who's had the experiences. You must fit into this box to make us all comfortable, and that's academia failing. No, it's not us failing academia, because a professional who feels their professional responsibility will say, I'm not the person for this. You need to find somebody else. But there's the ego and the shame for them as well. Oh, I couldn't get her through. Oh, she wasn't, you know, the performing monkey, you know, she won't do what she's told. No, I won't.
Or you're breaking grounds. And they haven't broken.
Oh, they don't like that at all. Stop with the poetry. What's that about?
Can I say something? It just reminded me, like I have a friend, he's an AutoEthnographer too in Brazil, and he just published a piece in Portuguese about, it's called cafetinagem in academia, meaning like abusive relationships. It's unbelievable. And then I started thinking about, like, we are always looking outward, right? In academia, like we research other people, we research, you know, business, we research like the community. And who's looking at what's going on here? Like the abuse that people, and just one story I had, like I wish she was here, one of my graduate students, I would say like one of the best, and she's doing a PhD. In her master degree, she was working with this woman, she retired finally. She was so abusive to her. And she came to me because she took a class with me, and she's like, I want to do my master, but this woman is like, so she told me the stories of this professor was doing to her. And I didn't believe it. I'm like, are you kidding me? So I talked to another teacher, and we both like, you know, rescue her pretty much. And this is like one of the brightest people that I have ever met, this student, right? And now she's back to do a PhD. I mean, these things happen, right?
They do, But there's a paper in it, you see, because exactly what you said. The feeling was the same, that this supervisor was replicating the abusive behaviour that I would have had as a judge. And I thought, where out here? So, you know, in the back of your mind, you go, the teacher's saying, this paper in it.
There's a paper in it, but there's also a textbook written by Twinley and Leatherby last year about the PhD experience as an embodied political, emotional, blah, blah, all kinds of things experience. So it's wonderful reading, wonderful. And how the the idea that your experience of writing a PhD has a great and direct impact on the work that you deliver.
Of course.
So, so a whole book on it. So read it.
What's the name?
What's it called?
It's Twinley and Leatherby, the doctoral journey as a political, emotional, embodied experience, or maybe not quite in that order. Routledge, it's with Routledge. It's edited, so there are lots of, there are contributions from supervisors, there are contributions from students and examiners, and there are contributions from supervisors and students writing together.
Judy, did you want to sneak?
And put it in the chat.
Do you want to sneak a question in before we go downstairs?
Oh, well, I actually had a comment that's quite a while ago, but I just wanted to thank, I just wanted to thank Anne-Marie for, I want to thank all the presenters, they were really great, but I think what you do, you challenge the binary between failure and success. I mean, and also like Rolf said, you know, what is knowledge? How do we get knowledge? It's so linear the way we think that we learn and get knowledge, and it isn't like that. And I just hope we can take that back with us and to our students and to our private relationships and out in the world, because it's important knowledge to bring with us.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Thank you.
Something really quickly about Chris's presentation. I thought that humor was the best possible vehicle to discuss about the absurdity of the ethos of the NHS. I don't think that this could have been communicated other than just making fun of it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's all about othering, basically maintaining that false idea, whereas most of the people working there were functioning depressives like myself at the time. Anyway, but yeah, plus you've got the well-being industrial complex that's actually keeping the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatric industry going, and that's they're really sitting at the top of all this, making sure that no one moves anywhere, but they're codependent. Medication.
Have you disseminated this anywhere else?
I have. Well, I was going to present it, but there wasn't time because we had it was 12 minutes and I cut it down to 8. But it was just the antidepressant citalopram, which is being distributed all the time by doctors. Going to doctors, I say, take this, take this. And I made this poem actually out of all the generic names of citalopram and linked it with the different countries. So you have, it's called World Peace, and on the world side you've got New Zealand, Germany, Brazil. I've got it written down here in my folder. And then you have all the different names. So in Spain it's citalopram, but in Russia it's called pram. Or the best one is in Argentina it's called humor. It's crazy, and it is what I've written about, just very briefly to introduce the poem, that it's Euro-colonialism. Because what you're doing, rather than like with terrestrial colonialism, you have a host nation that you then force to have grow one product. What they're doing with psychiatry is forcing you to have one set of generic symptoms, which they can then cure for you. And you're then actually kept in a state of emotional underdevelopment, like an underdeveloped country, colonized country. And it's a crime, basically. It's just a major crime. Because we know that the antidepressants originally, they were antipsychotics, but they realized there was more money to be made by selling it as an antidepressant, so they just rebranded it. And when I was working in the NHS at the beginning of this job, I was embedded, as they called it, in the community mental health team, where they would do the allocation meetings to people. And I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, and they'd have this boardroom where we're all talking, like doing the case files, whose allocation of caseloads. But before this, there would be a drug lunch, and they would have a lunch where the sales reps from the drug companies come in with an M&S spread of different snacks, hummus, salads and stuff. And this was my first week, which is, hey, there's a drug lunch today. And the sales rep does their PowerPoint presentation on the new improved antipsychotic.
And give a lot of samples.
Yeah, and they give samples.
And start the treatment with the free drugs.
And the psychiatric nurse who sat on my desk, you couldn't see her because she just had a wall of freebies in front of her, of, you know, calendars, pens, toys for the kids, and it was all just the drug company just bombarding it.
Paperweights, that's also.
Paperweights, yeah, all that. And it's just, you know, it's outrageous, really.
They're starting to do it with LSD now. I went to a workshop where they presented using psychedelics, and it was just the same thing with beautiful PowerPoints, efficient people describing, and this stuff that's in the mushrooms. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the next wave. But you legalize what we enjoyed in the 60s.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob. And on that wave of LSD, we must.